So I'm going to be putting together some videos on the draw, both outside the waistband, inside the waistband, typically your 3 to 4 o'clock position, why we may have to choose that position, and then appendix carry as well. So this will kind of be another little series, which will take a little time to kind of get through. Let's talk about presentation time and set time. What are they? Presentation time. How long does it take for you to draw your gun? And we're going to go with an arbitrary time period and say it's 1.5 seconds. So that would mean that if I had a target at 3 yards, it would take me 1.5 seconds to draw my gun. If it was at 25 yards, same 1.5 seconds, doesn't matter. And even if the target was at 50 yards, it would still take me 1.5 seconds in order to draw the gun. So that time always remains consistent. Now, when we look at set time is based on kind of 2 factors, and that is size of the target and distance relative to the target. Well, how does all this mix in? This is when we actually break the shot and fire the gun. So as an example, let's just take a 6-inch bullseye at 3 yards. My draw time is 1.5, and let's just say, for argument's sake, it takes me 0.3 in order to pull the trigger and get a hit. So my set time added 0.3 tenths of a second, which gives me an overall draw fire time of 1.8 seconds. That's at the 3-yard line. Well, we take that same size target and we move it back to the 25-yard line. When we move it back to the 25-yard line, well, I'm shooting the same size target, but it looks really small where it's at. So in that particular case, I might be adding on a second or even 2 seconds onto my time. So now what we're looking at is maybe an overall draw time of 2.5 seconds. So when we start to break down the draw, we have presentation and we have set. Presentation should remain the same. Set is always changing. There's 2 general negative categories. One is we fish the gun out of the holster, or the other one is we bowl the gun out of the holster towards the threat. Now, in an effort to prevent this, we created a number sequence. And the number sequence was like this: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 was generally us firing, or something very similar to that. And fundamentally, what that took care of was it took care of the bowling and it took care of the fishing as well. Those were both generally gone. Drawback to it, in my opinion, and remember, this is just merely my opinion. There are many different ways to do things. I kind of differ in some of the categories, this being one of them. What I started noticing was people became very robotic. And fundamentally, we cured one problem, and I believe we kind of added another problem, which was we're not trimming the fat where we need to, we're not rounding the bag the way we need to, we're not shaving off tenths of a second where we need to, especially if we're behind a power curve. So I'll give you an example. I believe crawling is different than walking, and walking is different than running, and this is a running sport, which means people's hands generally go 0 to 100 when they're behind a power curve. Okay, and a gun goes off at a Walmart because some dude's smoke checking a bunch of people. So the reality is I look at it as, well, then let's take what is natural and let's roll with that and throw that in there. If that's what they're naturally going to do, let's do that. However, we do have to place emphasis in certain areas. So an example of the numbering sequence would be I'm teaching you how to play baseball. You hit one up against a wall in Wrigley Field and you run the first, step on the bag, and you literally 90-degree turn, run the second, and as soon as you get the second, another 90-degree turn, and that puts you running to third base and third to home and so on and so forth. You cannot tell me that that's not going to cost players a lot of time, which is why they don't do it. So what do? We round that bag, we hit the corner, and we're already running the second. Our foot just touches first and we're gone. That's the same way I like to attack the draw. Just round the corners as best as possible. Let's get that time back, especially again if we are behind the power curve. So what was taught to me many years ago by a guy named Al Clark, over at Blackwater back in the day was quick to the gun, sure of your grip, quick to the threat, sure of your shot. Now, fundamentally, we are duplicating everything that we're talking about. We're saying, hey, this hand right here, our weapon hand, slides in to home plate and gets a good high tang grip on the gun. So I don't want any gap in there. And the reason being is because if I grab low on the gun, what's gonna end up happening is I won't have really any spot to put my reaction hand. So if you screw up this hand right here, you're screwing up the real estate for this hand to take over. Now, we say quick to the gun, sure of your grip, quick to the threat, sure of your shot, okay? Now we wanna establish this gun in our workspace, in this 12 to 16 inch of workspace. We wanna establish it in early so that if something happens, I can get on the gun right here and the gun's off, and I'm driving it to the target. What we wanna avoid is drawing the gun and then capturing it out here, or the gun goes off and now I'm trying to get my hand on it and the gun's trying to go to the path of least resistance. So typically this hand is always coming back center line. Now, mine looks like this. Everybody's slightly different. My wrist has been broken 3 times in the same place. So this is what works best for me. So when we're looking at it from the side view, I come in and then I'm driving out on target. Okay, from the front, I come in and I'm driving out on target. Now you'll notice I have a slight cant on the muzzle. And for me to track my front sight, boom, I have a slight cant. If you can track your front sight and keep it parallel to the target, good, do it. It's gonna cost you less time. Now, we don't wanna be aggressive like this because then we start getting back into that fishing thing again. So again, we want to make sure that the muzzle is primarily at that target all the time, because we also have to think what happens if we do a close proximity shoot. And if we're doing a close proximity shoot, then we're training the same way, so it doesn't really matter if it happens, we're ready, the muzzle's there, it's in between me and the adversary if need be. If not, I've captured the gun in early and I'm driving out. When I drive out, I see a lot of students sometimes just drive really hard. The problem is that if you drive really hard, or if you've ever wringed a towel a little bit, there's a little bit of cavitation at the end. And if you fire, your accuracy is going to diminish. And then, of course, if you wait for that to stop, then that costs you time. So we're trying to drive out as fast as we can, but still controlled. So quick to the gun, sure of your grip, quick to the threat, sure of your shot.